Coming to you from the all-new Live House in Hollywood, California.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's holiday version of Pensado's Place. If you ever wondered what it's like to be an in-house engineer, our guest is going to show you how. But first, a couple of things. We head to Summer NAMM. We've got an incredible panel for you. Hitmaker extraordinaire Luke Laird will be there, along with his amazing wife, Beth. They have hits with Carrie Underwood, Luke Bryan, Blake Shelton, Brad Paisley, Lady Antebellum, Eric Church, and a whole bunch more. Beth oversees Creative Nation. That's a growing force in Nashville for publishing and management. We also have the amazingly super hot Ross Copperman, 19 number one country singles on folks like Keith Urban, Dierks Bentley, Kenny Chesney, Darius Rucker, Florida Georgia Line, and more. If you are a songwriter or a producer or a publisher interested in management, ladies and guys, you want to make sure you come to this one. This panel will be packed and loaded. We'll probably give away some prizes. You know how we do it, Pensado style. When is it? Our session is Saturday, July 20th at 1 p.m. Then a meetup with our guest at 2 right after. Takes place at the Amazing Music Center. And you, our audience, can get in free because our partners at NAMM are so cool. How do you do that? You go to this link you see right here. When it asks for a code, you put in Pensado, do this ASAP, get there early. You don't want to miss this. So come see the Summer NAMM session. We're going to have a ball. We're in our second week of the Axio Summer Sweepstakes. Next week, we're going to start giving away some prizes. This is a super cool interface. Dave, a couple of quick features of it.
Well, first of all, I'm impressed with the quality and the features and the value of it. It's got 48-volt Phantom. It's got headphone amps. A real cool feature where you can adjust the impedance. It's called the Z knob. A JFET input, which gives you even harmonics like tubes. You get a free Amplitude 4 and Ableton Lite Live. So check it out.
The Axio Sweepstakes is on and popping. It comes from IK Multimedia, so please sign up now. And if you need more information, it's pretty easy. Just sign up for our newsletter. Do us the favor and the honor of subscribing, and click notify right here. We most appreciate it. And now our guest does a couple things. He's an in-house engineer. He's also an educator. We've done his pro audio files. Please welcome to the desk the one, the only, Matthew Weiss. How are you, man?
Man, I'm doing good.
Good to see you again, buddy.
Dave, nice to see you as always.
So in-house engineer, it means different things to different people. In the world of Konvict, is it Konvict Records, Konvict Entertainment?
It was Konvict Muzik, now it is Akonic Label Group.
Akonic Label Group.
Yes.
And what does an in-house engineer have to do there? I just heard something about 600 songs. To explain.
Well, in-house is a misnomer.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like personal engineer to the label. So whatever's going on there, whether it's happening in-house or if it's happening elsewhere, I'm going there and I'm doing whatever needs to be done.
Because I think the reality of today's world is with such portability, in-house doesn't mean one place.
Definitely not.
It means wherever you're needed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha.
It means big studio, hotel room, airport, whatever.
Absolutely.
You work a lot in Miami, don't you?
It's on a ton in Miami, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when you're was it Akonic? What's the name of the company?
Akonic Label Group.
Akonic Label Group. ALG?
ALG.
Gotcha. So are there artists signed to it, and is it just Akon himself, or what else? Give us the snapshot.
So Akon is the flagship artist, but then there are also a lot of artists underneath, including some of Khan's children who are extremely talented. I don't know who's been officially signed and who's just in talks necessarily, but there's about 4 or 5 other artists that are on the roster that are being developed.
Are there other engineers beside you, or is it just you?
Not at the moment, but there probably will be.
In the plans.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Akon does a lot of work back in Africa. Is he still doing so much work? And if you can explain a little bit about it, shine a little light on it, because he's really philanthropic and really doing some incredible things.
So I'm not involved in Lighting Africa. I know of it through my personal relationship with Khan. Basically, for those that don't know, it's an attempt to bring solar power to underpowered countries and areas of countries in Africa. But it's actually a global company. It's now going to be moving to America soon, because there's places, even in this country, where there's not enough electricity, which sounds unreal, but it's the truth.
Do any of those efforts involve music?
No, actually, Caine is very specific about keeping the music side of things and that part of business as separate as possible.
Got it. And so, is there, from your perspective, inside the in-house context, is there a signature that Matt brings to the table from a mix standpoint?
Anytime you have a creative mind, whether it's an artist, a writer, a producer, a mix engineer, a tracking engineer, a signature is going to come along with it. It's hard to quantify it into like one solid thing, but yes, I'm on every record in some small way, shape, or form.
Well, and I will tell you that I think the converse side of that is true. We've had some very successful engineers who know how to not be in the way and not have a signature so things come through. So I think it can depend either way. So in your particular case, you have a signature what would be your signature?
If I had to put it down into one thing, I would say it's bringing in a diversified set of influences. My background has ranged so much. We were talking before the show. I started with a guy from MFSB, Sound of Philadelphia. That's funk, old school, what we would look at today. First Grammy nomination collaboration was in jazz. I have a Spelman Award in rock. For a long time, I was working with Space Cowboy, who was Lady Gaga's DJ. That's all EDM, so I was doing a huge bulk of EDM. I was doing a lot of stuff in Norway after the Spelman Award, and that was all sorts of stuff. What's the Spelman Award? It's like a Norwegian Grammy.
Oh, okay.
And then, coming in with Caine, the projects we've been working on, there's reggaeton and Latin, then there's a street album, there's pop, there's Afrobeat, there's just different directions from everywhere.
You once said that you're not totally transparent, nor are you completely inflicting your complete taste on you're in the middle, is what you said.
In the middle makes it sound like there's sort of a binary to it, and there isn't. On the one hand, my job is to facilitate the vision of the artist and producer. That's the most important thing I can do. But through the process of doing that, it is inevitable that my choices are going to influence that to a degree. You can't make a choice without making the choice.
How do you deal with rough mixes then?
The rough mix is, okay, so here's the thing on rough mixes. This is very important for any engineer to understand.
Okay.
When you cut a record, you go in the studio, the writers put it together, they've paid the label, you've got people running around making the magic happen, and then there's this moment after, maybe it's an hour, maybe it's 4 hours, whatever it is, where the engineer hits playback on the final take, and they hear it tracked fresh. And there's a champagne bottle effect where everyone goes, that's the record. But it hasn't been mixed yet. So as the mix engineer, you have to understand that anybody who was in that studio didn't just hear that record, they had that feeling. And if you change that too much, it's not going to remind them of that feeling. So you have to keep that feeling going when you do the mix. Otherwise, they're not going to listen to the record and go, yes, that was the magic. That reminds me of what I felt when we completed that and everybody was cheering. They're going to go, that's not the same record. Whether it's better or worse is irrelevant.
I think that's the best answer to that question I've ever gotten. That was incredible.
I've only done this hundreds of times now, so, I've had many times where I've been tempted to go away from the rough, and sometimes I will, make a call and say, this needs to change. And at this point, everyone's comfortable with me, so they accept it. But most of the time, people who are working on these records really put their heart and soul into it, and they get it right.
Yeah. Also, too, a lot of the things you described are not necessarily sonic things. And then also there could be a chance that the engineer could make it better.
Well, ideally, we do make it better, right? We find a way to feel the soul of the record, capture the essence of it, and then go, how do we make the end listener really, really feel that same feeling, whatever it is? And so ideally, we're doing that, but we're not really doing it just with sound. We're facilitating the emotion of the record. So I don't even think sound is really the proper barometer. I almost kind of think of what I do as downstream production. It's part of the music process. Sound just happens to be the medium.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for a young kid starting out in today's world? It's a little different than when we started out, It is. I sometimes like to call myself the last living intern because there were not a lot of internships after like 2005, I would say get involved with as much as you possibly can, because it's not only the experience that you need, but it's also the people that you meet.
And your team will ultimately decide how successful
Give me
you
some
are.
examples of what they should get involved with.
Everything. So my example when I came out to LA was that I shared a studio with a guy named Andrew Dawson, who's Kanye's tracking engineer. And my goal was just to have people in that studio no matter what. Whether I was making money off of it or not was really a secondary consideration. I wanted writers, I wanted producers, I wanted managers, I wanted everybody in that studio I could get so that I could meet those people. Because from those people, that's where my team came from. And that's what led me to become successful.
You said that music is a conversation. I'm fascinated by that sentence. Explain.
Well, I think you probably know what that means when you're setting the levels and one instrument is playing off of another. But where
And
that
it can be live too.
Absolutely. Well, where it comes from is my family is jazz musicians, and my intro to music was jazz. And the way that jazz works is it's not music in the sense of just notes, harmonies, melodies. It's what one person is doing in the moment, and then another musician picks up on it and goes, okay, I can react to that and I can work with that and I can give it something so that it's almost like the musicians are talking to each other through the notes. That still is true, whether you're talking about rock or pop or EDM. Everything is functioning together to create one big picture.
That's not the answer I expected.
I'm sorry, what answer did you expect? Take two?
Yeah.
That's a funny response. Well, rather than take two, I think that the Nashville example is a corollary to what he's talking about. So ultimately, you're working together in some sort of harmony, dependent on each other. Sometimes the ball gets passed along, sometimes you don't know where it's coming, and you all end up forming this picture.
Not that
as
part,
artists.
but within the context of recorded material, there's things that are conversing with each other metaphorically, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
I only speak in metaphors.
Well, it's the same thing in terms of as mixing becomes more of a process of being passed along as opposed to specialists do something different at each stage. It's an ongoing thing from the rough to wherever the case may be, and everybody's doing a little bit of mixing and they're doing a little bit of producing, and then you end up with a result that makes sense. That's different than back in the day when it was this guy played that and passed along, this person did this and this person. There's a different collaborative nature that goes on now in everything that goes on.
You were asking, is the process of music also a collaboration? And yes, more than it ever has been.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Even if you do everything yourself, there's still a conversation that's going to happen.
Absolutely.
There is no one-man team. I've never seen it happen. And even the ones that appear that way, that's not what's going on.
It's pretty fascinating. It seems like requirements for educating people that are just coming up in our profession now are completely different and have different needs than 10 years ago or even when we came up. What's your thoughts on today's educational process and what needs to be done?
Well, like Herb was saying before, the process of making music is becoming a lot more shared. So the mix engineer might be doing some producing, the producer might be tracking. There's a lot of shared work. So it's important for everybody to kind of know everything, which is why what we're doing, what you're doing, and what I do on the Pro Audio files is so important because everyone needs to know.
Yeah.
I think when we talk to audiences all the time, we talk about the hybridization, even though that's not really a word, that you have to be a hybrid today in almost all media in order to find a place in media because the specialists are just not hired anymore. And if you're not trying to learn it all, somebody who has learned it all is going to take your spot because they're going to bring more to the party. So you got mix engineers who are teachers. You have people who are managers who have shows. You have, whether you play or not, you better learn how to have that language, whether you sing or not. And I think it's fascinating because it gives opportunity for people to contribute differently, which makes the music more interesting or the end process more interesting. But folks who are trying to just do one thing are going to be left out in the cold. And I don't believe that even when you look at your tools, when you look at whether it's plugins, whatever the case may be, you see all kinds of collaborative elements where you can join with other things, different DAWs and so forth, because the community is now making music as one thing. And I think that's a good thing. As it relates to education, I think that also means that your choices have to be more informed. If it's school, It can't just be theoretical learning. There's got to be hands-on learning. If it's hands-on learning, you should know the other thing. I got into a debate with one school because they only wanted to teach one DAW. And I was like, well, you can do that, but boy, you're going to limit your enrollment. You know, it depends.
There are a couple of schools that still do that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure it's the wise thing. Do you play anything as you've evolved? Are you at the point where you play something?
So I play a little bit. Like I can play a little bit of piano.
Mm-hmm.
I can play a little bit of bass, but I'm not a particularly good instrumentalist.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm playing something, it's definitely gone wrong.
Well, but you'd be surprised the number of people who sat in that chair who don't consider themselves great musicians, but utilize their music to write great things. They just find out the element. I think Jason Evigan was one who said not necessarily a great player, but major songwriter, and just plays what he knows can work to inform him about melody.
He's a beast.
And in terms of his hits, absolutely. When you work in different places, are you just loading up your laptop and going wherever you need to be, and then does monitoring differently affect your mixes or whatever the case may be? And that's a problem?
One of the hardest parts of this job is that you don't know what is going to be there. And it's never what you expect, because I went to a studio that was supposed to be a really, really nice facility, and literally everything was broken.
Mm-hmm.
So I was
Must
fixing...
have been in New York.
It was not in New York, but it could have been.
New York. Oh, I feel bad.
I'm not going to say which one it was.
Okay. No, I wouldn't.
Not even going to hint. But I had to fix everything on the fly. And so, yeah, it definitely... And the monitoring at some of these studios is crazy.
It's crazy.
So...
Absolutely crazy. Yeah. We see that problem with lots of folks. You know, we know of circumstances where people use duvets in hotel rooms to try to get the sound what you need. But there's a whole nother skill set now in just trying to have your mixes be something that you can count on and rely on and turn back in.
I don't travel well. It's not my gift.
Yeah, you don't mix that much when you're traveling.
No, it takes me 4 or 5 days just to be able to get acclimated to the room, you know.
Man, the record that just came out, the Akon single, I mixed it on an airplane.
Mm-hmm.
Are we talking about Get Money?
Yeah.
With Manuel?
Yeah, with Manuel, yeah. On the way to the music video shoot.
Wow.
So.
We've heard that story a few times.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
That's a great song. How did that record come about?
So that record was produced by Akon's son, Ali. His producer name is Wave. And it was actually an older record. And then we sort of brought it back to life. Mafio and DJ Luan, the two of the producers on the project, brought Anuel into it. Anuel wrote a Spanish part and then wrote a Spanish part for Caine, who sort of hybridized it and kind of freshened it up and brought it back to life. And we heard it and we're like, well, it didn't really fit with the rest of the project, but it was such a good song that we just knew we were going to have to go with it.
Tell us a story, an interesting story from the process of making that record.
From making that particular record or the whole album?
Oh, that record, because I like that record a lot. Did High Flow do something on that record?
No, that's Ozuna, Commentale.
Oh, okay.
And Ozuna,
that's a great record too, by the way.
That was a great record. I had a lot of fun making
Let's go back
record.
to the story. I want to hear the story.
There's not a lot. Well, the craziest story is that I had to mix it on the plane. So, I mean, outside of that, I mean, there is craziness to it, but I mean, there's craziness to all of these things that I don't know what I can and can't talk about.
What headphones did you use?
I used Sony DR somethings. I don't know.
That's cool, though. It can be done, right?
Absolutely.
Is that your go-to headphone when you're running around?
My go-to headphones is whatever I have. So, yes, I love those headphones.
That's an additional set of issues in terms of figuring out what to...
My feeling is that when it comes to music, the real answer, and we always want to talk about techniques and the magic and all this kind of stuff, but the real answer is to get it done. Because that's actually the thing that ultimately makes or breaks whether or not the record happens.
What question do you get asked most often?
Will you listen to my music?
And how do you answer it?
I usually say yes, but give me some time and don't get mad if it gets lost in the shuffles. I get asked that maybe like 5 times a week or so, and then I'm working on tons of projects. So
do you ever learn anything from those songs you have to listen to?
I learned that there's a lot of people who haven't made a name for themselves that are pretty freaking talented. That's what I
You just
learned.
doubled the amount of people that are going to send you stuff.
Oh God, I know. It's okay. Send it, baby.
And we'll help and send you all the stuff they send to us and send over to you. Yeah, you'll be swamped. Oh my God. Does the talent side of the business affect you as well? Do you find yourself identifying talent, maybe suggesting it to the label? Is that part of the interest level of yours or no?
So I did that recently, and it really bit me in the ass.
In what way?
I heard a song that somebody sent me, and I liked it. Mm-hmm. Usually the songs need work, but this one was actually pretty darn good. Mm-hmm. So I was like, you know what? This guy really wants to work with Con. I'm going to send it to Con. So I sent it to Con, and he was like, yeah, I have an artist. I want this person to meet up with them and write for them. And we'll start off that relationship that way. So I hit the guy up. He's like, Con's interested in you as a songwriter. Let's set it up. Started to set it up. He wanted to use the song that was sent, right? So the guy sends me a song. When I tell him that that's the song that they want to cut, he says, I don't want them to cut that song. It's personal to me. So I said...
You never Shazammed it, or...?
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. He sent me the song. Right. So that's what Con heard. So I just said, okay, and I haven't talked to him since, and I never will. So, but I put my neck out there a little bit, and I immediately regretted it.
But it wasn't his song. Is that what
No, it was.
He didn't want him to use it because he sent it and then he pulled it back by saying it was too personal.
Yeah,
which is ridiculous. I mean, that's
of course it's personal. It's a song.
But whatever his personal connection was, don't send it if you don't intend for somebody else to be able to use it. That's just basic.
Yes,
basic.
Well,
stupidity.
just that one. Don't give up on him. You know, there's some good stuff out there.
Oh no, I think that there's the reality, in my view, is that there's so much good music around that, people have gotten used to the tools and being able to do it themselves, how to access people, how to distribute, how to put it out. It's now your selector that you have to be really concerned about. And then figuring out the business of it once you've selected something is a whole other process before you can access the people that you want to get things to. It's a litigious kind of time, and, you have to be super, super careful. People have access to people that they've never had before. So, you end up with a gatekeeper role that becomes, pretty critical. We've been burnt before on things.
Yeah.
I think everybody gets burnt.
Yeah. Let's get technical for just one little tiny minute. I love the way you use saturation. Can you explain how you use it, why you use it, and some of the tools you use it?
I started in the analog world with digital layback, but still on consoles. I was toward the tail end of that world, but there was something immediately I missed because it's easier to get a pleasing sound right off the bat. Still, I think to this day. But what it's in is ultimately the distortions, these harmonics that almost act like photo saturation. They highlight the sound by making it more colorful and make it more identifiable. So I always wanted to recreate that feeling and that sensibility, and it just required doing it all manually. The analog stuff does it for you a little bit.
Exactly.
We have to do it all ourselves when we're working digitally.
So if I get this straight, you're injecting harmonics, like mostly even harmonics, into the sound, and if you want a little edge, you're doing odd harmonics. And what tools are you using?
Let's see, Black Box HG2.
Oh yeah,
that's a really, really good one.
Yeah,
especially because
both EQ and real.
Yeah, I use that one
Not
also.
EQ, I mean both plug-in and analog.
I followed.
Man,
that one's good for also dynamic shaping in addition to getting the color. I love Sound Toys Decapitator. That's a great one. Fab Filter Saturn. Really good one. But I've rarely met a distortion I don't like. So,
That's cool. And do you find it that you use it on vocals and give me an example of what you do with a vocal?
So there's a lot of ways I use saturation on vocals, but one is a lot of times in a recording, there's something that's a little deficient, and EQ doesn't necessarily get it there.
Exactly.
So especially if you have to get rid of something that's kind of like ugly, like you need that 400 hertz, 500 hertz body, but that's also where the room tone is. So you're cutting, but you need more there. Distortion can be used to supply harmonics and supply energy to that frequency world and create the feel of having a presence in that range without actually having to have it there to begin with. So for thinner vocals, I'll take Decapitator and I'll put it on like the A setting or maybe the T setting if I want something a little bit more woolly. And I'll do this distortion that has the tone knob turned to the darker side and the top end is filtered out. So it just sounds like this kind of a thing. And then I just blend it in a little bit to just put that up in there. And it's like suddenly those frequencies that we wish we had, now they're there. So we've elevated the recording quality.
We've got the tools now, really. The tools that we have now, if you can't make a good record, you need to work a little harder because we've got the tools to do everything.
Yeah.
With particularly with Akon in doing multiple genres of music, was rock stuff in there as well too? Do you ever find yourself in a position where you're tracking?
I haven't tracked a lot of rock stuff in a long time. I was working with a band called Merlot Embargo that was doing all rock stuff, and it was such a pleasure to do it. But I haven't, with Con, rock is the one genre we really haven't touched.
Oh, I got you.
Which is a
But you
bummer.
have tracked before in that space, right? And because I think that's another science.
Oh, yeah.
That is a completely different science that sometimes can be a lost art for folks who are in hip hop.
And the engineers who do it,
amazing.
So yeah, oh man, they're so good.
They are just absolute scientists. And what's funny is when they share with us the way they experiment, because they experiment with no cap. They just, I did this and moved that and put two mics here and then turned this around in the corner and all of a sudden, boom, and then you hear the records, you go, whoa, man, that made such a difference. The creativity is, it's fun to see that.
The king or queen of that stuff too.
I mean, there's
always surprising.
So many. Sylvia is amazing. Eric Valentine is amazing. Joe Ciccarelli's amazing. Jay Baumgartner. The sounds they get are just unreal. Joe Barresi. Brilliant.
Ross Hogarth. In terms of mixes that you receive, sessions for, what is some of the, let's don't use the word mistakes, but where are some areas of an improvement that the engineers that recorded those can give you and make your life easier? For me, I get that bounce off of a microphone that creates a 4K just train wreck and then a lot of low end.
It's very rare that I get a session in that's perfect. This is kind of where the philosophy of getting it done comes from. I'm so used to getting sessions in that are absolutely crazy in the way that they're recorded, in the way that they're produced. And it's like, I feel like there's not an error out there or a glitch out there that I haven't run into. So the only thing I can say is if you're the producer, no matter what that means, because sometimes producer means the person directing the action of the song. Sometimes the producer is actually the person playing it and composing it, like if they're making the beat. But if you're the producer, take ownership of it and make sure the performances are really good. The two things that are the biggest errors that are hard to fix are the song is not fully arranged and the vocal delivery is not 100% there. Those two things are very, very difficult to fix.
Just as an aside, it's really hard to get emotional performances when you're singing through headphones because it's the most foreign thing on earth to sing through headphones. And a lot of times the performance suffers because an artist might have themselves in their headphones too loud, so that makes them kind of sing a little different. And we're always kind of combating headphones and how they've kind of reduced the level of energy and performance. And so you hear that person on stage, you know what they're capable of doing, and so you try to make it work out. Loudness. I love everything as loud as I can get it. So for me, there is no loudness wars. We won. Us loudness guys won years ago. Check this out. How many times have you done this, Herb? It's late at night, you're driving around, and I know you play your music loud when you're driving around, and you play a lot of rock. And then you pull into the garage, and you're not thinking anything about it. Then the next morning, you turn on the car, and you're yeah, oh man, I didn't know I was listening that loud. That's because loudness is wonderful. What's your take on that?
So loudness...
And by the way, good loud, not just...
Well, loudness, good or bad, is just a thing, right? It's not. There's no inherent good or evil to being loud. It doesn't
I disagree.
have.
I disagree. Everything sounds better loud.
All right, you're right. I take it back. Here's the thing with loudness.
Uh-huh.
So when you remember that studio moment where everyone's popping the champagne because they just completed a song, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. If you're in a studio and you've got mains, you can make that thing loud.
Yep.
Loud. But the actual mix is not necessarily compressed dynamically.
Yeah.
So you have a dynamic record that's being played very loud.
Yeah.
Now, when you go to make the actual final playback and final master version of it, how do you make it have the loudness that the labels want or that the people are used to hearing, but still have that dynamic energy that existed when they first heard it in the studio? So loudness is a consideration that really affects the mix in a lot of profound ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, just turn that
You make a
thing
good
up.
point. You make a very good point. There's good loud and bad loud. To me, the key to loudness is Fletcher Munson, because that's that frequency that lies between, say, 800 and 3K is what we determine loudness by, and that's the speech range. So our ears are attuned to that. If you can crank that just to where it starts to hurt, you can make people sound loud, make things sound loud.
I think making things sound loud is not that tough at the end of the day.
I agree.
I think that doing it, because the way that we want to do it is we want to take all that like hearty bass so that when the club hits, we sound better than everybody else's record in the world, because that kick is like, how do we make that get into that world and not lose that Fletcher Munson curve where our ears go, I hear that.
And also, I think, from a consumer standpoint, loudness should serve emotion. You turn it up because you feel something, and it accentuates that feeling.
Well put.
Because if it's just the technical process of being loud, to me that can err into bad loud. It's just loud, and loud can start to be like oppressive.
But you never play a bad song you don't like loud. You always play songs you like loud.
I'll play a bad song if it's got a good section that I like loud, because it touches me emotionally, and then I'll turn it down. Back when they had solos and stuff, you would crank a solo and they'd be ripping something, but those days don't happen anymore.
You were rocking Owner of a Lonely Heart pretty loud the other day.
Great. And it's because it emotionally, at that level, feels like a different kind of record. I like to get lost in those kind of records.
Well, I think what you're saying there is extremely valuable wisdom, because so we know we are going to have to get the record loud at some point. It's an inevitability right now. Might change later, but here we are. When we use distortion and saturation, which one of my favorite tools, we can use distortion and saturation to put energy into the Fletcher Munson region, that 800 to 3K, and create that loudness. And we do it by picking the distortions that musically are satisfying to hear. And so if we're smart about how we get loudness, we can do it in a way that serves the song.
Absolutely.
And that's the real trick of it.
Yeah.
But that's not that easy to do sometimes.
It just takes a little time. But yeah, I agree with you. It's not easy.
Well, and also, you also can use the Herbation-Runson curve. And that will give you the emotional kind of...
Is that the one that Lurch invented on the Munsters?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it starts with you rang, and then it goes to other places.
That's the tone that's around like, whoa.
When you're in Philly, what sports teams, were you a sports fan at all?
Let's not talk about sports. I box.
Okay.
I love UFC. I like boxing.
I love UFC.
So yeah, UFC is awesome. But God, I'm going to get killed going home. I was never a baseball guy.
Okay.
When the Eagles won the Super Bowl, for that one night, I was a huge Eagles fan. I'm not going to lie, but I was never really that into football.
Which is fine, because the context is just that you enjoy certain sports.
I enjoy when we're winning.
Okay, so you're competitive.
Yes.
All right, so Batter's Box is coming up. It's time for you to be competitive and, knock Brother Dave out the park. And you can call it whatever. Let's make it a UFC fight.
You already know I'm a fast talker.
So he can, he may get down and put you and he may give you a wrist lock. You just never know what might.
I'm feeling a little bit like that on my side.
No. I'm just moderating. So I have to call it. You have to be even on those sides.
This neutrality.
Well, if you do well, I'll be right back.
Okay.
All right. So fire away.
Stereo bus.
Compression.
Vocals.
Editing.
Reverb.
Cassie M7.
Man, my man. 808s.
Mid-range frequencies.
Strings.
Room.
Time out just for UFC. You now just went from half guard to full guard, which means you're in trouble. So go ahead.
Okay, good.
He knows what that means.
Delays.
Echo Boy.
Loops.
Switch them up with automation.
Limiter.
Fab Filter L2.
Bass.
Transient Designer.
What's the cheapest piece of gear you use on a well-known record?
Handsome Audio Zulu.
Damn, he's good, Herm. Okay, going back to the 808. What was your answer again?
Mid-range frequencies.
What is that? You can expand on that one, just for me.
So remember we were talking about that Fletcher-Munson curve and saturation? 808s are just a big old sub-frequency.
Yeah.
So if we want to hear them, and we want to hear them, we need to put something that's a little above that primary fundamental. Otherwise, we're not going to hear it on the laptop. It's not going to be that loud in the club. We'll get the weight, but not the note.
And square up a little bit of that sine waviness that an 808 can have too.
Exactly. And give it some character.
Yeah, good stuff.
Lots of information, lots of technical information. You know, one of the beauties that we have is that we get to educate and share information with stuff and keep people abreast. And also, I think, constantly learn. The ability to learn from others and catch other things and have great guests. So thanks for coming on. Good luck with Pro Audio Files. Say hello to Con. And we've certainly been a fan of his and what he's doing and a fan of what you're doing. Dave, take us home.
Man, I'm sitting here thinking, you know, Matthew, his answers were concise. They were quick. They were, he really knows his stuff. And you can see how that has contributed to his success with just a little bit of imagination. And I think that's something to strive for is master your tools, master your craft, have a logic behind the things you're doing and practice that one logic. And I think that's a good pathway to success. Wouldn't you agree?
Completely.
We'll see you next time.